We will start off the presentation with a recap of our existing storyboard and a synopsis. This slide shows the synopsis for the whole game and encompasses the player taking the role of Octavian, the first emperor of the Roman Empire. This journey will take the player through the underworld where we meet key figures in Octavian and Julius Caesar's life to stop an unknown plague that's overtaken the underworld. Octavian is our main protagonist, and Julius Caesar is the main antagonist. Let's get into the narrative of our game now. So I hope that you're all familiar with the photo here, which shows Hades from the Disney cartoon Hercules, and we must remember that Roman culture was heavily influenced by the Greeks, especially in the form of paganism and hence the gods they believed in or in afterlife. While the afterlife is meant to be a peaceful end, we are turning the image upside down and showing a version that has been turned on its head by an evil force, and stopping this scourge is the driving force of our narrative. The tyrannical version of Caesar's soul has seized control of the underworld. This evil is so powerful that there could only be one person competent enough to bring this perversion to an end: Octavian himself. This twisted version of the afterlife is a setting for the limbo that our protagonist, Octavian, finds himself in with one final task. This narrative is driven forward by Octavian or the player gathering key figures in Caesar's life like Brutus and working together to stop him. This slide shows off some of the concepts that we were inspired by and how we envision the environment of this dark fantasy tale to look like with the image from earlier as well as the ferry on the river Styx and possible battlegrounds. Our Act 1 starts with the opening scene of Octavian on his deathbed. Octavian's spirit awakens in the underworld and meets Hades first, who briefs Octavian, the player, on the situation that the underworld has been corrupted by Caesar. Octavian is then given a corporeal form by Hades to stop Caesar, the tyrant. Hades and Chiron help Octavian travel across the river Styx to begin his journey, telling him that he will require help in order to complete his task. They arrive on the shores at their destination. Both Hades and Chiron point in a singular direction and freeze, not answering any more of Octavian's burning questions. Octavian has no choice but to follow the direction they point in. He walks for a time that seems endless before seeing a figure in the distance, leaning against a tree. He feels drawn to this figure and approaches cautiously, realizing that it is Brutus and strikes up a conversation. Brutus agrees to join Octavian on his quest to end the tyrant. The opening battle with Brutus is a tutorial for the player and learn the basics of the game, such as positioning and how to use skills to win at fights. This will include battles, skirmishes against small patrolling bands of troops who are tied to servitude to Caesar. They are the undying soldiers of Legio X Equestris, Caesar's most trusted legion. This will lead up to the battle against the first major boss of the story, Mark Antony. As Caesar's most trusted general, he has faithfully maintained his loyalty to the former dictator Perpetual and carries out his orders faithfully, even when he has turned into a tyrant. Upon defeating him, the player, along with Brutus, continue forth and realize that Mark Antony was no more than just a pawn in Caesar's corruption. With all that said, we have translated into the form of a storyboard for the opening act of the game. The slides will be submitted, so do feel free to look through them. Ben will now take you through the rest of the plot development.
Thank you, Damien, for the introduction. Next up, after Mark Antony's defeat, the story will progress as we see a small portion of the underworld returning to normal, specifically in the areas surrounding Mark Antony's territory. Octavian sees this and gains more motivation to find out the truth behind the scourge, as he starts to doubt everything he knew his father to be. So the story will progress as Octavian and Brutus continue to defeat legions of troops and save souls from being tormented, some of which are notable characters from the lives of Caesar and Octavian, like Cato and Cassius. While some of these souls belong to prominent figures in Rome's history, such as Scipio Africanus, as the underworld is host to all souls from the past, present, and future. I would like to state here at this point that we restricted the cast of characters to that of only within ancient Rome, as we felt that characters who came from the distant future would not fit thematically with the creative direction that the team wanted. And also how paganism would fizzle out with Emperor Constantine's rise a few centuries later. Some lost souls would also make a portion of Octavian and Brutus's forces here as non-playable characters, NPCs, and they can be taken into battle as well. The next major battle to conclude this act would actually come against Caesar himself. After gathering enough information, our duo will find Caesar in a twisted version of the Temple of Pompey, the place where Caesar was assassinated in the mortal realm. It is here that Caesar's spirit resides in torment, like a ghost that haunts a place that is emotionally tethered to. Octavian and Brutus confront Caesar and engage in battle in hopes of ending the scourge once and for all. Caesar, however, is a formidable foe, with many legionaries definitely loyal to him, and the battle here will be much harder than the previous act, requiring the player to pay much more attention to strategy. My teammate will get into more of this later on. So once the battle is over, the scourge does not cease immediately, but rather it lingers. Brutus is confused and is unable to ascertain why this is happening. However, Octavian is more concerned and trying to understand why his father became a tyrant in the underworld. And in doing so, he learns that from Caesar's dying form, that Caesar was just a pawn in the scheme of another powerful entity. And Caesar thanks Octavian and Brutus for freeing him from his torment, and that he is proud of the person that Octavian has become. So these here are the storyboards for Act 2, starting with the defeat of Mark Antony, and how we notice the environment start to change for the better. And then we also have Octavian and Brutus gathering information and finally defeating Caesar, in sort of the culmination of Act 2. Moving on to Act 3, there is this new revelation of someone or something else pulling the strings. Octavian and Brutus can't help but be confused with no leads at all. So the pair eventually bump into Hades as they continue to fight against corrupted legionnaires in their search for more information. They bring forth Caesar's information to Hades, and Hades reveals that perhaps the scourge originates from the very beginning of Rome, and with no other better leads, pair head for Palatine Hill, or the underworld's version of it, at least in this twisted version of Rome. So pair would arrive and realize that Hades' information was actually right, that Octavian's place of residence, where he reigned as emperor in the mortal realm, which is Palatine Hill, is now actually filled with enemies. They fight through all these enemies to get to the heart of the hill and stumble into Remus. Remus reveals that he is the source of the scourge, as he is bitter about his death at the hands of his own brother, Romulus, the founder of Rome. And Palatine Hill is actually the location where Rome was founded. So a battle thus ensues as Octavian and Brutus try to finish what they started. Now, of course, Octavian and Brutus' forces will begin to falter against Remus, as Remus's legions are way too powerful, for they have been sitting in this seat of the scourge for way too long. And before Remus can strike that final blow, Romulus arrives to bolster Octavian. So eventually the battle ends, and Romulus is able to properly lay Remus to rest and regrets his death tremendously. Octavian and Brutus witness this and are able to stop the scourge and save the underworld. So these are the storyboards for our Act 3. This is just for the final sequence against Remus, where and it just shows how the game is coming to an end with this final fight sequence. John will now take you through the mechanics of the game.
Thanks, Ben. Now I'll explain how the game is played. Our game is a tactics and strategy game, where the main gameplay will be fighting in 3D real-time battles. When you start the game, you'll be taken through a tutorial. Before every battle, there will be a setup phase. During this phase, you have a bird's eye view of the battlefield and you can plan for the battle. You'll be given a certain amount of coins which you can then use to buy and place the troops that you want to use in the battle. On this slide, you can see that the player has bought some troops and has them arranged in 3 lines. Your player character is standing behind them, and in front of them are 2 lines of enemy troops. When you start out, you only have access to the V-Lights, which are light infantry troops with little equipment, as you can see in the left picture. As you win battles, you will earn in-game currency called souls. You can use these to unlock other troop types as well as upgrade your existing troops. For example, you can unlock archeries, cavalry, and artillery. Different types of troops will have different amounts of health, armor, range, attack, and movement speed. Troops can create different formations that change how they perform in combat. For example, you can form your soldiers into a testudo formation as shown here. This formation sacrifices mobility in favor of defensiveness. Alternatively, you could form them into a wedge formation where you aim for a quick and decisive battle. You can also employ complex tactics to help you achieve victory. For example, soldiers can ambush enemies or flank them to avoid frontal engagement. Once you have set up your troops, you then take control of your player character and fight as them. You'll be able to use your skills and weapons to fight against the enemy. This will be covered in greater detail later. When you start a new game, you'll be offered a choice between one of 3 difficulties: casual, normal, and hardcore. The game mode that you're playing will change several aspects of gameplay. For casual, you'll get 20% more coins and souls, your character will get more health. If you die in battle, your troops will fight on until they die. If you still lose the battle, you can try the battle again and you'll be granted extra coins to buy more troops. By comparison, on hardcore, you only get half the amounts of coins and souls and enemies will be stronger. If you die in battle, the battle ends right there and you have to fight it again. Our game has 3 different bosses to fight, and this is how we envision the fights to look. The first one will be against Mark Antony. The second will be against Julius Caesar, and on his right you can see the troops bearing insignia of the Stand Legion. This boss fight will take place in Pompey's Theatre, which was the site where Caesar was killed. Lastly, there is the fight with Remus, the final boss of the game. Next, Peng Yu will talk about the player characters and the bosses.
With John having explained the game mechanics, I would now like to expand on how the game plays out as playable characters. Unique characters bring about their own unique skills, and thus each of the playable commanders have certain skills that only they can use to turn the tides of battle. These skills may signify certain events of the past, or a callback to the character itself, thus fitting the overall theme of the character. So skills are split into passive or active skills. Passive skills are always in operation and provide permanent bonuses. Active skills can be casted to affect either their own selves, their allies, or their opponents, and each come with a cooldown. That means once casted, it needs a fixed amount of time before the spell can be casted again. All spells start off being able to be casted unless otherwise stated. We included icons to allow players to better visualize the spell, as well as add symbolism to the skills. For our playable characters, we firstly have Octavian. Being the main protagonist of the story, we designed him to be more righteous and noble, rallying and supporting his troops. Thus, his skills include Imperator, reflecting his status as a general that has never seen defeat, and motivating his troops that they are on the winning side. Rain of Arrows is a callback to his post as a highly successful naval commander of Caesar's army during his time in life, innovating new ways to crush the enemy. Next, we have Brutus, who acts as a foil to Octavian, where his skills are morally questionable. His skills reflect that of his status as a cunning traitor that is on your side this time round. This includes convincing enemies to betray their leaders by bribing them, as a reference to how Brutus was one of the conspirators who initiated the plan to murder Caesar. He takes into account people's weaknesses and backstabs them for his advantage. With that, we have our bosses. Bosses are similar to playable characters, in the sense that they too are unique and have unique skills and passives, which makes the story more challenging for the player while expressing historical elements that they hold in their stories. First up, Mark Antony. Although enemy villains are usually designed to be evil and have more detrimental skills, his character as Caesar's right-hand flustered man, with unwavering loyalty, makes it so that we designed him to be an upright enemy, and his skills reflect so. He protects his allies and is willing to take an arrow for them, while he rushes to his allies' needs at a moment's notice. With his history with Egyptian Queen Cleopatra, He holds certain sway over Egyptian troops and can call them into battle. Next up, the great Julius Caesar, who is a great character in his own right, but is now corrupted by hatred and vengeance. Against the great conqueror Julius Caesar, your player troops cower in fear for their lives, as who doesn't know Caesar's military prowess and endless victories? Thus anyone who stands in Caesar's way usually fails to obtain a good ending. His passive links to his most trusted legion, the 10th Legion, which he always placed on his right flank. These elite troops are much stronger than usual soldiers and brings about Caesar's victories. In a last twist, we faced off against the legendary Remus, one of the two creators of Rome. Remus and Romulus are both of Roman myth, thus we believe that Remus too should fight as though he is from the myth, and thus includes godly powers and mythical arts. As the final boss, he has two phases, starting from phase 1, where he transforms into an alpha wolf. This symbolism is because wolves represent Roman power, and were the sacred animal of Roman god of war Mars. This also references to how Remus was raised by a she-wolf. As child should follow parent, Remus can shapeshift himself into an alpha wolf, and thus his skills reflect that of a wolf. As the alpha pack leader, he summons smaller wolves to fight for him, while they hunt down prey together. Similar to how animals hunt, they target the old, young, or sickly, in which for our game, they hunt down the weakest enemy and consumes them for strength. If he managed to hold off and defeat Remus in his wolf form, he reverts back to his divine form in one last finale. As a myth, he symbolizes the divine and the unknown, thus draws powers upon utterly worldly powers and calls forth natural disasters on his enemies. His blessed strength from the war god Mars allows him to single-handedly push back his enemies, breaking their formation and their will, while evoking tidal waves from the powers of Terebrus, the power of the god of the Tiber River, who is said to have saved Remus to drown his enemies. His divine fortitude gives him endless energy, enabling him to recover from attacks and be unaffected by negative debuffs. In conclusion, here are some of our improvements we made since the midterms, such as adding more to the story, adding characters from the past such as Remus and Romulus, adding more storyboard images, and fleshed out battle mechanics and the players and bosses. With that, we've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you.